What I want to understand then, Brett, is I've been looking at going to Europa Park, and I'm sure that a lot of our listeners have. Can you explain to the listeners how to get to Europa Park? Because it seems like you have to go to different countries and different ways of getting there. Do you want to talk us through that and how you found the whole journey?
So I didn't book it. My girlfriend and her friend booked it, and they told me about how much of a nightmare it was to actually book. However, when you actually book these things and kind of work out where you're going, the actual journey itself isn't as daunting as you first think. So we travelled from Manchester to Basel or Basel, as it's spelt, which is just in France essentially. Well, it's this is the kind of the caveat to what we're getting at here. This airport is actually in Switzerland, France, and Germany. It's a weird three-way airport. Uh, I think they actually looked at package deals and stuff, and Europa Park doesn't tend to deal with package deal things and different kind of uh, agents like that. So booking things separately is not only a little bit more difficult, but actually far cheaper. They found that they were almost cutting the costs in half than if they were to do it through a sort of travel agent or anything. Um, what we did is we booked an EasyJet flight. The EasyJet flight flows from Manchester to Bâle at, I think it was around 6:30 p.m. and it does this actually every day. It's almost like a train. You know how you have the same times every single day, um, and it arrives in Bâle at about 9:30ish, something like that. The only issue now is that we were going to get a bus from Bâle Airport, but we'd have to cross the border within the airport, which makes it sound quite daunting that you have to cross borders inside an airport. But you just walk to another part of an airport. It's the same corridor. You're just in a different country. Um, it was something we weren't aware of until we were actually there. So it's really not as complicated as it sounds. We then got a Flix bus, which I think is a fairly common bus in Germany and that sort of area. The Flix bus goes, I think, all the way to Frankfurt, if I remember right, but it stops off at Europa Park. The only issue is the bus goes in the morning and then obviously comes back at night time, and we could only travel at night time, so we had to stay in, I think it was an Acer hotel across the way from the airport, which was a really cheap um like budget hotel, but we were only sleeping there to get the bus the next day. It was quite an easy kind of overnight stay. Get the bus the next morning, and it drops you right at the entrance to Europa Park. Um, and it was pretty easy getting back. It was the same bus stop, a Flix bus that picked us up at about 20 past 7 at night, and we got to the airport with about 40 minutes to get on our flight. There was a bit of a rush because the bus was slightly late, but we still made it. Uh, so I definitely think if you're thinking about doing it, I think that's a good way of doing it. It saves you having to travel to an airport like Cologne or anywhere else, or Frankfurt that's actually 2 hours away as opposed to an hour and a half on this bus that we were on. Obviously, the other alternative is to drive, but we think that
Yeah,
flying and the
with its
were cheaper.
with its strange location there, Europa Park, you do have a number of options. If you can get a flight, there is an airport in Baden. It's possible, but you're probably not getting one from Manchester. You can fly to Strasbourg. That's not far, technically, from it. You're in France, but you're closer to it than Frankfurt. However, your problem with that is then I would not recommend renting a car in France and driving into Germany. That's not your best way of doing things. You'd be better off to go to Germany. Like, I mean, if you fly to Frankfurt, it is a bit further away, but car rentals real cheap. A lot cheaper in Germany than it is in France, and a lot cheaper than it is in Switzerland as well. If you want to rent one in Baden, oh, that's expensive.
So
So
what kind of cost are we? So what kind of cost are we talking about, Brett? In terms of how much could we expect to pay to travel over there to stay, pay for the tickets, etc. If we went for a few days?
So we went for 2 days. Tickets ranged from around 50, 60 euros, which is similar to any general theme park admission. They do half day tickets, which is what we did on our third day while we were waiting for our bus home, and so we did that as well. I think they were at 34 euros or something like that. To the flights there, the EasyJet flights, I found one in February, for instance, for as cheap as £34 a flight return. The max I found was like 120, £130 a flight. And the hotels on the resort are, as expected, fairly expensive. You're looking at €270 a night for some of them. However, we stayed off-site in Rust, and it really wasn't that expensive at all. You can find anything for your budget there. You can find some pretty cheap hotels. We had a nice little apartment. Um, Overall, I think the whole thing came to about £700-800 for us to go, have 3 days in park and 3 nights worth of accommodation, including the night that we had to stay over in Bâle Airport. So it really wasn't that bad, and we took €300 spending money, and we actually struggled to spend it. We got halfway through the second day and went, "Oh, we should probably buy a load of ride photos and stuff." So it was. The food is fairly reasonably priced as well. It's not extortionate over there, really. I thought it was going to be far more expensive than it actually was.